Hi, my name's Dr. John Lund, and I'm the author of How to Hug a Porcupine. And that's a book about toxic behaviors, dealing with difficult to love people. And this is a very, very important concept. And so, what I want to do first of all is give you a little background. I've been a divorce mediator for 15 years. I've been a marriage and family educator for 43 years. I was a family court commissioner for 5 years in the state of Washington, determining where the children went and how the division of assets went in a relationship. I'm coming from a position of being very, very practical. I'm not coming from just an ivory tower or a theoretical position. And so we're going to talk about some behaviors that are critical in terms of helping a marriage stay together. What is it? There's a fundamental principle. Let's see if we can go over that principle now. If I had two giant magnets here, and these magnets were, of course, at opposite poles, no matter how hard you would try, you'd find these magnets would be repelling. And on the other hand, if we were to invert those magnets and push them, you find they draw together. And I used to have a couple of giant horseshoe magnets that it was nearly impossible to pull apart because they were so strong. The same is true of behaviors. There are behaviors that attract, and there are behaviors that repel. And we're going to be talking about a number of issues as we deal with toxic behaviors. So let me define a toxic behavior. A toxic behavior is any behavior that detracts from you or someone else becoming your highest and best self. That's what a toxic behavior is. Now, that may sound rather broad, and we'll see if we can't bring it into something more positive. But imagine, people don't have a hard time loving each other. Do you realize that? It's the inability to deal with the negative that is the greatest issue that we have to look at. And so when people adopt what I call toxic behaviors, then it prevents them from being able to share the love that they have. There was a wonderful book written by Dr. John Gottman out at the University of Washington, and it was called How Relationships or Why Relationships Succeed or Fail. And the irony of that was that Dr. Gottman pointed out that unless you have 5 positives for every negative, the relationship will eventually fail. Most of us don't even think about positive things that are happening in terms of interactions, but we need to look at toxic behaviors. So let's look at just a toxic behavior, and later we're going to talk about a toxic personality. That's an individual that adopts toxic behaviors as a normal course of their communication and interaction. So for right now, let's talk about a toxic behavior as any behavior that, for example, does not allow you to become your highest and best self. So as we look at that, one of the first ones that I think may be the most obvious is going to be criticism. Now, criticism is very, very interesting. We have grown up in a hyper-critical society. We'll have a lot to say about this as we go through the book at different times, but for right now, I just want to point out that it's a habit that most of us have that we're not even aware of. And I like to compare that to this. In China, they have different kinds of teas that they brew. And some of these recipes are literally thousands of years old. Well, some of the teas they've now found, as they've analyzed them, have in them arsenic. Just a tiny, tiny amount. Well, that amount may not kill you, but a cumulative amount of that will indeed lead to death. And that's toxic and that's poison. And the same is true in relationships. Most relationships can survive a certain amount of criticism. They can survive that. The reality of it is, however, that no relationship can survive long term and be emotionally safe when you have criticism as a part of the constant diet. We'll talk more about this later.